So with Stellar Blade coming to PC this year, and with it not even being nominated for 2024's Game of the Year, despite its overwhelming success, you might be questioning whether or not this game is actually worth picking up. Well, given the time this video's release, I can't actually speak to how well the quality of the PC port turned out. However, I just got done playing it on PS5, so I can talk about the quality of the game itself. Do be aware that there are a lot of positives that I'll be raising in the video, but there are also some very poignant negatives I'll be raising at the end that may sway your purchasing decision. Some that may make you want to pick up this game on sale, or simply not at all. So let's find out if Stellar Blade is a game that you need to be adding to your collection. I avoided playing Stellar Blade upon its release, given all the noise around the character's hypersexualization, and whether or not this game was something of substance, or if its whole appeal was just... I managed to find this game on sale, so I figured screw it, why not? I finally tried it and holy shit was I surprised. The game opens you up to a breathtaking scene of these intricately designed ships crashing into Earth. Chaos ensues and life pods are being shot out and shot down. The pod that Eve is on, the character that you control, manages to make it to the surface, but not before sustaining some damage. You fail to open the door to your pod and you're instantly met with a sense of dread, a fear that your journey is over before it even began. Your friend, Taki, rips the door open and frees you from your encapsulated prison. Now after the game teaches you some very basic moves, you see your savior, Taki, become slaughtered right before your very eyes. You are washed over with waves of guilt, and right before you meet your demise, Taki once again steps in to save you from your imminent death. You see her arm be cut off, then impaled and disposed of with such ease. Unable to repay the favor and frozen by what you've just seen, mere seconds from your own death, you are swept away by Adam to get the fuck out of the way. Once you're in a safer area, you have a discussion about what just happened, you learn about the monsters who are called Naytibas, and your goal becomes clear. Now more motivated than ever, you set off to find out what happened in the giant war, aim to restore humanity, and even have moments of self-actualization forcing Eve to question her own humanity. Along the way, you'll also come across quite personal and heart-wrenching moments. One example was with Taki, but there are also more subtle moments too, like discovering an abandoned safe haven in an underground sewer, a place where people could seek refuge from devastating events taking place, a last-stitched effort to harness the desperate human drive to survive. The only remnants left behind are possessions that tell the tale of some kind of humanity and kindness left in this decrepit and decaying world, a glimmer of hope that one day the world can be restored to its former self. There's also another scene that got me at the end of the game. I won't reveal here because it's a spoiler, but all I can say is I'll be floating among the stars to space. If you know, you know, but Jesus, that was a heavy moment. This game is kicking my ass in boss fights and emotions. Now obviously if you clicked on this video, chances are you haven't played this game yet. So for that reason, I'm going to stop talking about story specific moments just to avoid spoiling the game for you. Before we do address those negatives, let's first address what the game excels in. Throughout your play, you are taken to many locations around Earth, and this setting is perfectly mastered to convey a level of decay that the planet has sunken into, with decrepit buildings, large sinkholes, and overgrown shrubbery present at every corner of the screen, abandoned factories and shipping containers, hidden makeshift hideouts made by survivors. It all adds to tell a story of complete apocalyptic devastation. The level design is a massive strength of this game, and it was an incredible experience being drip-fed new locations to explore and uncover more of what actually went on in this world. The levels also house the many collectibles, some that are fed back into your character's upgrades, as well as cosmetic outfits. All of this, partnered with one of the most compelling and moving soundtracks, delivers players such a complete gaming experience. Moving into the next major strength of this game is its combat, arguably one of the best parts of the game if I'm being honest with you. You start the game with a sword that has some fairly basic mechanics already unlocked for you. Now you do feel quite weak as regular enemies are easily able to take you out. I did find there to be somewhat of a learning curve here with regards to the combat, but you'll quickly be able to invest in multiple skill trees to make your Eve much more efficient and formidable. The sense of progression in this game is amazing. There will be enemies that give you trouble right at the start, and you're just gonna sit there like, nah, fuck man, I just started the game. So you stop eating my ass for a second? But then after like an hour of playing, upgrading skills and getting used to the systems, you take them out with such ease and it's the best feeling. I felt so accomplished going back to enemies I struggled with just to have no issues with them at all. And just while we're on the enemies, Jesus Christ, all the ones I've come across look amazing. From bosses all the way down to these little annoying insect things. Everything you encounter looks so good and just speaks to the overall design language of the game. Now, as I said, combat has a bit of a learning curve at the start. I was struggling with the dodging because, well, the dodge was more of a step back, but then you see the insane amount of skill tree and ability upgrades that you get, and you can really start tailoring Eve to your personal style. Some players prefer a parry. I'm more of a dodge and get the fuck out of the way and run back in kind of guy. So I unlocked Blink and a double dodge roll. As soon as I started to upgrade Eve into my style, it all just clicked. I was making much better choices in combat to the point where I felt fucking invincible. Oh! What the fuck, dude? Oh my god, dude, that is insane. Now that all feels great, but then you unlock new abilities, special or ultimate moves, you get new weapons and a different mode. You'll know what I'm talking about when you play. But all of this adds to an absolutely fantastic experience for the players, as the more you play, the more ingredients you have to mix and match and cook up the most devastating combos for your foes. There is such a high level of customization here with how many things you can equip to Eve to apply buffs, resistances, increase damage outputs, ammo types, skill trees, the list just goes on. And all of this put into use when you're going up against a large variety of enemies, but most importantly, the bosses. Oh my god, every boss in this game is fucking awesome. From unique designs to interesting and varying attack patterns to well-designed battlegrounds that take advantage of environmental elements such as spilled oil that can be lit on fire that both of you and the boss can utilize freely. Every boss in this game was something to look forward to and an absolute highlight. They force you to use everything you've learned, and despite some being ball-bustingly difficult, you are met with a wave of satisfaction when you time your dodges and parries perfectly to unload your barrage of custom attacks and abilities. It feels so good and just hugely rewarding. However, do be aware that if you lean toward being more of a casual player, this game is more on the difficult side. There are 2 difficulty options to start with, and while a story mode is very doable for most of the game, some bosses will still put up a really good fight. This isn't just a simple hack and slash game, it is paramount that you focus, learn to time your moves in order to be successful. Now on the topic of customization, and either a big positive or a point of contention based on how much grass you touch, are Eve's outfits. Eve has many outfits to unlock in this game, some more promiscuous than others, yet these outfits do little else other than to change the look of Eve. All outfits unlocked in this game are purely cosmetic, and this also goes for the available hairstyles and accessories. Nothing is tied to a buff or stat change of any sort, so this whole section of the game is purely around Eve's aesthetic. There are a lot of outfits to unlock here and lots of hair options and accessories too. These can all be mixed and matched and you can come up with many combinations. It's nothing too wild or crazy, but enough to allow players to combine different assets to create an Eve in their preferred image. Lastly, it's just the vast amount of things that you can do in this game. You have your standard story missions, but then you also have side quests scattered all across the different map areas. You then have bulletin boards where citizens will post more jobs for rewards. You can then speak to NPCs who give you upgrades of varying sorts. There's a photo mode to play around with. Oh, what are you doing? Why is your eye all bung, mate? What are you doing, mate? There's a fishing minigame, but you can collect cans, and just many more things for you to do. It is an action-packed game, one that you'll really enjoy, especially if you are a completionist. So clearly this game has a lot going for it. And if you've been liking what you've seen or heard so far, you might be pretty sold on the idea of buying this game either on PS5 or PC when it comes out. However, let's get into those gripes I had with the game that may potentially sway your purchasing decision. Just forewarning, these are my personal opinions and it's 100% okay if you disagree. How much weight you place on these issues is completely subjective, but they did take away from the great overall experience that I was having. So let's get into them. So Acts 1 and 2 were phenomenal in my opinion. We established such a rich and vivid world with clear history that has led Earth down this path of destruction. It had fantastic locations to explore and set up a great foundation and had so many wonderful boss encounters. So much of the game's appeal comes from being able to explore these open areas and really dig into the world's lore, stumbling into completely optional areas and bosses, and also being rewarded for that exploring. Keep that idea of exploring in your mind, we're going to be addressing that in a second. Move into Act 3 and for me, it gets a little shaky. I would argue it has some of the most beautiful locations seen in the game and some of the most wild boss encounters, and on its own has some great reveals, albeit them being a little predictable. What really soured this experience for me was this point of no return. The game makes it very clear to you that if you embark on this ship and get on this orbit elevator, anything left incomplete will essentially be forfeited. All your side missions, all your bulletin board missions, uncollected gear, cosmetics, outfits, uncaught fish, etc. will all be gone from that point on. And you can't come back to do the side missions once you finish the game either. It puts players into position of either do it now or do it never. Now I was getting really invested into the story, so I didn't really do as many side missions as I'd normally do when I play games. I don't normally do everything, but I do a fair few. I was so engrossed in the story that was unfolding that I just had to keep going to see where it went. Until I got to this part here and I was kind of like, shit, what do I do? I can either halt the entire story that I've been enjoying so much in favor of doing more menial side missions, or I just let go of them all. It felt almost punishing to the player who enjoys the story over anything else, not being able to do anything from this point onwards. I absolutely hated this feeling, so I take the elevator, but begrudgingly so. I feel like so much of the game's layers and appeal was just stripped from me at this moment, shut off from so many things that I could no longer experience unless I do another playthrough. I really would have preferred if they said, hey, this is a point of no return. However, once you finish the game, you can come back to each area to complete all the side missions. There are so many games that let you do this, so it was just frustrating that Stellar Blade wasn't one of them. Now, as this game can be completed in 12 to 16 hours, you might personally feel like you aren't getting your money's worth. How much game time equates to the purchase price is only a metric you can decide. I was personally fine with it as I got the game on sale anyways. However, I know others would find this many hours disappointing at full retail price. My only advice to you watching is now you know to do the side missions before this point of no return to add more hours into your game. Now, my next main issue was the pacing. Again, this is entirely a personal preference, but I felt that the pacing was so well done in those first two acts, and once you take that elevator, it kind of falls off the rails. After the orbit elevator, gameplay drastically changes. It shifts its focus into more tight corridors and boss encounters. There's now very little room to explore, and that's obviously understandable given the environment we're in, because it just doesn't really allow for that. But I would have liked a little bit more freedom when where I'm going on this giant spaceship. Now, as previously mentioned before, the exploring. I felt that that was one of the best aspects of this game, and having that taken away from me made me feel like the part of the game's appeal was stripped away. The bosses, while mostly fantastic in this act, felt like they were all just dumped in at the end. When you get into the orbit elevator, you have about 3 hours of game left before it ends. From this point on, you fight something like 7 to 8 bosses. I loved most of the boss encounters, but cramming this many in within the last 3 hours changed the perfected flow of gameplay. It also means that there's very little time for the story to adequately justify these boss encounters, and it just kind of feels like the game changes into a boss rush mode. The game does try to utilize these bosses to elevate many twists or reveals, but because not enough time is given for the player to really absorb that information before prematurely being pushed to the next boss, the impacts of those reveals are fairly lackluster. One example is I'm fighting this giant thing in space and it just kind of happens and we all move on. I'm like, wait, what the fuck? Just let me relish in this moment, let me enjoy it. Some of the reveals were cool but weren't given the necessary time. Other reveals were just okay, and a few others were so obvious that you could pick them from a mile away. Again, no spoilers, but a character does something that's so out of pocket when we're all making our way to a certain location and you immediately go, okay, you're a little bit of a sassy bugger. They have this big reveal at the end and you just kind of like, yeah, okay, like that wasn't obvious at all. I felt like the game ran out of story and relied heavily on subverting expectations as a substitute to finishing off the story strong. Now, I've praised the bosses a lot in this video, and again, they were such a huge highlight. One boss, however, really annoyed me because it's at the very end of the game and you are introduced to a new mechanic. Why? Why introduce us to new shit within the last 1 to 2 hours of finishing this game? I was fighting the unidentified Natiba, and all of a sudden I get a pop-up mid-fight. Not only does this disrupt the flow of the fight, but it introduces the most annoying mechanic where I have to shoot slow-moving targets in the air. Failing to do so, you get an insta-kill. This added no extra fun to the boss fight, and in my opinion, only detracted from an otherwise great encounter. It also just speaks to that notion that this was added in as an afterthought rather than being a really thought out, refined boss mechanic. Lastly is the padding in the final sections that made me feel like the devs knew this part was super short, so they tried to artificially lengthen the game. There is so much padding with unnecessary button pushes, powering up doors, climbing and scaling walls where it feels completely disingenuous to the game, and it's clearly an attempt to lengthen this section. I just can't shake the feeling that for me, the third act felt incredibly messy and disjointed. However, when I'm segregated from the rest of the game and with no access to side missions or any other content, can you really blame me? I know I'm probably in the minority with this opinion, and that's completely fine, but if you at all resonate with what I'm saying, just keep this in mind when you're making a purchasing decision. These things may very well be for you and it might make you more excited to play, who knows, but this was my experience with the game and I'm walking away from Stellar Blade still having an absolute ball of a time. It is a game that I can recommend, but the value prospect of whether you buy it at full price or on sale is up to you and what you personally like doing in games. If you do all the optional bosses, side missions, and all the collectibles, it is absolutely an easy full price recommendation. If you don't care about any of that and just want to do the story, just be aware that you're going to be having roughly a 12 to 16 hour experience on your hands. Is that worth the asking price? That's a decision only you can make. So Stellar Blade, not without its faults, has really given me one of the most action-packed, unique and engrossing gaming experiences I've had for a long time. It has so many options for customization, a rich world, an impressive roster of well-designed enemies and bosses, and a great supporting cast to help Eve along her journey. Aside from a few fumbles at the end for me, Stellar Blade is a game that reaches for the stars and on most accounts delivers a unique and fulfilling experience.